Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. That thing that I do on Tuesday nights for your entertainments. Hope everyone's doing well. Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Tristan. I'm not. Don't need to wear headphones as I do every week, apparently. I am a person who makes moving pictures for the internet. Somehow, that means that I have good opinions. So, I do this show once a week where I talk to you guys for a few hours and talk about things and stuff and answer questions and hang out. And we just have a really good evening together. And man, oh man, oh man. It's been like 2 weeks because we couldn't do it last week because of VidCon. So things have just been so bananas. So here we are. Hi. Ugh. Okay. I'm seeing text. I'm seeing questions. I'm seeing a very active chat. Oh boy. Look at all of those people. So I have been very, very deep in the process of researching stuff and writing, actually. That's the biggest thing. I'm writing the next big step back video, which, by the way, I also need to talk about the fact that I released a quick step that became one of the most popular step back, first of all, I released both the first and second most popular first 24 hours on the channel for a video last week while I was in California, and I released the Ancient Aliens video, which is a video I have been working on since, basically since sometime in March. I think early March is when I first started working on that video, so that's huge. That video was a huge labor of love, and I am so happy that it has been received in such a positive way. So, thank you. Second order of business, I'm writing another script for a video very much in the same type of style, and I'm going to the YouTube space on Thursday to film it with a group of people, including the return of Thought Slime, and a first-time cameo from Kelly, who is watching this stream, and taking all your questions and writing it down. Other things I think that I can mention are that I went to VidCon, and that was a whole thing, and I went to EduCon, which is the fancy thing that YouTube hosts for educators. So, definitely, I think somebody asked me about how my VidCon was, so I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, it's been quite a fortnight, and not the kind that flosses. Although, actually, I did watch Scott Niswander from NerdSync floss when he couldn't think of what to say. So he said he was just going to floss to wake himself up. So, it's been a whole thing. Also, I was checked out of the news for the last week, which meant that I missed, apparently, Trump being the most racist he's ever been, which is quite a high bar to hit. And then on top of that, by the way, Dalton Jones, thank you so much for the $1 super chat. I didn't want to forget that. Much appreciated. What else did I also miss? I'm looks like I'm talking about drama and things like that. So, well, what do you know? There's a lot. There's a lot to talk about today. So, we'll see what happens. So the first question comes from Logan Anderson, and the question is, how was VidCon? And VidCon was good. VidCon was very good. Maybe I'll tell the whole story about how it went down. Okay. So I met a bunch of people. Some I have met before, but some are people who I have been talking with online and just met for the first time, and some people who I had not talked to online who I met for the first time and are pretty awesome. So, if you really want me to go through the whole story, which I could, because this is my stream and I own it, so we'll see how interesting you guys find it. Okay, so the week of VidCon is like a freaking marathon. It's so intense. I and other educational YouTubers get invited just before VidCon every year to a what was originally a 1-day conference, but is now a 2-day conference, where we talk about education, and it's all about education. And YouTube obviously puts out a lot of money for these. We get free food, we get open bars, it's bananas. It's huge. So I went to that. I flew out last Monday, and when we landed, we got some drinks and some dinners, some poke bowls with who would have been there that you would have known, with Kelly, and with if you guys remember from my organ transplantation video, with Xander, the host of the channel Art Explains, and his girlfriend, and Cheryl, the roving naturalist, who I've done a video with, and Betty, who runs a channel called Articulations, and Toby, who runs a channel called Tibby's, which I had not heard of before. We had we kind of met there, and we had a good night. It was a good first night, and then the first day of EduCon was basically made up of two conferences or 2 workshops. They were actually very lightly attended. There was not many people here. People were still flying in that day. So there was a 2-hour workshop on lighting, and Kelly got really excited about that, hence why everything is so much better lit now, because Kelly was screwing in light bulbs and moving things around 2 minutes before the stream started. She was like, it's fine. It's fine. You have 100 seconds to screw in a light bulb. Do it, I guess. When Kelly's enthusiastic, she can be driven.
Would you prefer I don't care at all?
That is a good point. Should say, would you prefer if I didn't care at all? But no. So we did a 2-hour lighting workshop, which was really good. I think I now have had 3-point lighting described to me like 5 or 6 times, and I think I need like at least like 5 or 6 times more before it finally gets locked in my brain. Then we went to a second workshop. Well, first I got lunch, but then we went to a second workshop, which was on audio, where I talked with, basically, this was all in LA, at the YouTube space in LA, and we had a couple people talk to us. It was really fun. It was really good times. And then once that was done, there was like a mixer. And these events, because there's a mixer on the end of the second night too. That's like the bigger one. That's the one where they bring out food trucks and stuff. Those are nuts, because not only do I have a lot of friends who go to VidCon and EduCon regularly, but EduCon, being run by like YouTube, the corporation YouTube, and being an educational thing, brings out like everybody, which means that like the Cody from the Alternate History Hub was there. Ran into him again. They had all of the Complexly people came out, so a bunch of people who make SciShow, including the Green Brothers and other people whose faces you'd recognize if you watch a lot of things like SciShow and Crash Course and such. All of the really, really cool and hardworking people who work behind the scenes on that, including someone from Thought Cafe, which is based out of Toronto, which I'm going to actually go and visit, hopefully in the near-term future. And also a lot of PBS people come out. So all the people who run those like PBS education channels, a lot of them were there too. And on top of that, a lot of indie people. You name an educational YouTuber, they were probably there. in the history contingent of the people who do history stuff. Let's see. There was me, as you can see. Shannon Beats in the chat. So yeah, Mr. Beat was there, as was Shannon wasn't at the event, sadly, because they were being very, very stingy on the +1s. Was she at the event? Yeah. Okay, then never mind. My brain. A lot of people were were excluded, and remembering things is not my strong point. Was Lindsay Ellis there? Yes, she was. We had dinner together in 2018, so she remembered me and said hello and came to say hi, which was nice because it's good. It's good just to know that you're remembered by such important people. Out of the history contingent, also, yeah, Cody, for the alternate history hub guy was there. Friggin' Cypher, the cynical historian, was there. Dom, the guy who runs Cogito, was there. As was Xander from Art Explains. Trying to think of all the history channels you guys would know. I think, and of course I'm gonna miss one, and it's gonna kill me. There's Grant Hurst, the casual historian, was there. Mr. Bet, Tim Bet, who I really enjoyed. That guy is much more crass in person than his very kid-friendly channel would imply. The extra history guys there. No, I don't think they show their face because of all of the controversy surrounding James Portnoy. Knowing Better, yes, yeah. Will from Knowing Better was there. Mark and Avon from Alliterative were there. Sorry, I'm having trouble. There was a lot of people there. Friggin' people like CGP Grey were there, and Derek Mueller from Veritasium, and literally anybody that you could name was probably there. Danielle Bainbridge from The Origin of Everything. She was at EduCon very briefly. She had to leave very soon after it started. Sorry? Sargon was not there. Sargon is considered a propaganda channel, and trust me, someone that, from the people who I know who work at YouTube, nobody there wants to be associated with. What was the controversy about Extra History? He gaslit and basically destroyed the reputation of his ex-girlfriend because he couldn't handle. Was Michael from Vsauce there? No. The only person from Vsauce who showed up to EduCon was Kevin Lieber, who runs Vsauce 2. So there's no Michael, because I think Michael's trying to make the leap to legacy media. So yes, he was. Oh well, then see. There's so many people that I didn't even see them all. Obviously. All right. So instead of forgetting a bunch of people who were there, maybe I should just say there was a lot of guys there, a lot of people. And for the most part, the day was the second day was breakout sessions, a lot of stuff about business, a lot of stuff about trying to hack it as an educational media creator and all that kind of stuff, followed by a wonderful, followed by an amazing supper situation. Then, at the end of the day, we were stuffed onto buses and sent to Anaheim, which is where VidCon is hosted, where we were going to lose all of our VIP status as educators and go to the Viacom-owned VidCon, where we were, many of us anyway, were reduced to mere customers again. But that doesn't mean that VidCon was useless or anything like that. There was some cool swag at EduCon. I don't have it here because I haven't unpacked yet, but there's a metal lunchbox with Step Back History written on it. Okay, Kelly's going to get it for me. There was a kind of really nice tote bag and all sorts of stuff. Will there ever be a bread con? Oh man, I don't know if any of us are organized enough to put one of those together. I do feel like actually a lot of the here is the thing that they made. the Step Back History EduCon 2019. Also, the thing though is a lot of the more common thing than BreadCon would be the fact that a lot of people who are considered bread tubers could very easily be considered educators. Like Lindsay Ellis was already at EduCon, and I don't think it would take a lot of finagling to get like Ollie and Harry and all them there. But even then, it would be BreadCon would still be like events take a lot of work. That's what I've learned. Yeah. So it was pretty fun. So after EduCon, went to VidCon, which is in Anaheim. So what can I say the highlights of the things that happen at VidCon? So there's some rules about VidCon. One, the panels kind of suck. There's like one good panel that happens every year, and that is the analytics panel hosted by Matt Pat. But really, the rest of them are kind of like whatever. So what VidCon then becomes is hanging out with friends and networking. And unfortunately, the thing is, like, VidCon's only 3 days long, and everybody shows up, so you have so many things. You have so many people to meet that you feel like you don't have time to even spend a reasonable amount of time with any of them. So, a couple things that changed this year. The creator track has been diminished greatly, and the creator track lounge, which used to be this really nice place where you could get like free coffee and snacks and there was music and stuff, has been replaced with what I'm calling the Room of Sadness, which is this dark room with not that many chairs and like this like ominous purple lighting. Wait, isn't Matt Pat a homophobic cretin? Probably. Guy knows his way around analytics, though. You can both be homophobic and be very, very smart when it comes to analytics. I'm not going to be his friend, but I'm not going to not take his advice on analytics. And the Room of Sadness, yeah. So the Room of Sadness was a big deal. We almost got so disappointed that we were like done, but then it started to pick up. There were some good panels. There were some okay panels. I ran a networking panel on the second day. That was called it was the Education, the Arts, and Humanities panel. It was for networking. I wasn't like a panelist or anything like that. I was just there organizing stuff. Then, what did we do that day? We went to some panels. We hung out with people on the first day. I was really sick. I actually picked up a cold probably on the airplane or something. And by like the last day of EduCon, my throat was sore. And by the first day of VidCon, if I had been at home, that would have been one of those days where I would have stayed in bed all day. So I was like a complete disaster. And then at the end of the day, we decided to all go out to this Mongolian grill place, and because it was just a place that we went last year, and I thought, hey, let's all meet up here because it's a good enough place. It's like one of those places where you fill all of the bowls with stuff, and then they cook it for you. It's pretty fun. I thought like 10 people were gonna show up, but it ended up like being like 30 people who showed up, which was a huge, crazy thing. There's a photo of it somewhere. I think Mr. Beat had a photo taken. So there was like 30 people in this long, like, it was not like a circular table or anything like that. It was a long, one person on each side type table, and it was huge. We had dinner. And then I guess a bunch of history people stayed up to play Cards Against Humanity, making fun of me for being a Swigelian or an SJW or whatever the hell they want to call me. They played up. They basically joked about how I would disapprove of all the jokes they were making. But I felt like shit, so I went home at like 9 o'clock and went to bed. And I thought I had lost my wallet, but I had just grabbed the wrong backpack. That was fun. And then on day 2... Oh, geez. What are we doing? The days all blend together.
Day 2 is when you had your networking panel.
Yeah, day 2 is when I ran my networking panel. And in that networking panel, it was fun. A lot of people showed up. I was actually very, very heartened because I didn't think that a whole lot of people would show up, but a lot of people showed up, which made me very happy. I did have to stop a person from... So there was like one microphone to help you organize the room. But then I was hanging out with some people from TubeBuddy, and this guy came in, and this part I'm going to talk a little bit about. There's like networking at VidCon, like networking in a proper way, like the way that the informal job market works, where you make actual relationships with people, you become friends with people, and you just make good impressions on others so that when somebody thinks about something, they say, oh, my friend X does that. I'm going to connect you to. For example, I recently was talking about how cool my tattoo was with Scott from NerdSync, and then he was like, "Oh, who drew it? Scotch." And I was like, "Oh, and yeah, he does all of Natalie Wynn's like merchandising and stuff like that." And he's like, "Oh man, I'm getting an art redesign," and so I had them connected and stuff like that. I don't know where that's going to go from there, but that's something that is an example. But there's like those networkers who are people who have business soft skills, like where you are just a nice person and try to maintain good relationships with people. But then there's like networkers at VidCon, and those people come to every single networking event not knowing what the subject is or the title is, and they just they've got an elevator pitch that is like tight, and they give out like business cards like they're fucking pollinating the place. So, and these people are the worst. You can spot them from a mile away and you don't want to talk to them. So one of those came in, and he said I was talking with the guys from TubeBuddy, and the TubeBuddy people they were just joking around. Like these weren't like famous people from TubeBuddy. These are just like business reps or whatever. And so this guy came up to us and was like, "Hey, if I wanted to network with everyone in this room the fastest way possible, how would I do it?" And they were goofing off because I think they were just like on their lunch break or something, and they just said like, I don't know, just like take the microphone and just like yell at everybody, which like they were saying because they were joking, and he didn't get that, so he was like, "Okay, I'll do that." And so I had to run to the microphone to stop this guy from taking over the microphone. And I got to him. I got to it first, luckily, and I was like, "Yeah, you're not going to do that." And he was saying, "Well, like this is a very competitive business, and you have to stand out." So he was trying to convince me to let him do slam poetry during this networking event. And I took the microphone and I said, no, thank you. We will not be doing any slam poetry today. Thank you. I did not need... I was the one running this networking panel, and I did not need that on my reputation. Thank you very much. But other than that, panel went great. Talked to some cool people. Talked to some awesome industry folks. It's a good time. Then there are, of course, also people from like corporations who are coming in to try and get you to pay them to do stuff, which is a little skeezy, but that's VidCon. And then we had another panel that was run about half an hour later by Mark and Avon from Alliterative. But between those two panels, that was when I ran into Harry, H-Bomber guy. It was the only time I saw him the entire time because he had a fancy invited guest yellow badge, so he spent most of the time in like nice, comfy lounges with all behind security guards and stuff like that. So I didn't get to see him from like all of the rest of VidCon, but I got to see him for like 5 minutes between these two networking things. And he said that he's like, oh, I heard you made a really good video recently, which made me very happy. But we just caught up because we hadn't seen each other in a couple years, and it was really nice. And Dan Olson showed up for maybe about 5 minutes, and that was really nice. And it was just good to just to know that, you know, they're still there. They still know me. They still think I'm not a weirdo. So that's good. That's good. Yeah, but then they had to go to take off because I think like either Natalie or Cat Black was running a panel or something like that, so they had to go. And so then we had the second thing panel, and by that point, I think we're getting close to the end of day. I think it was like 3:30 by that point. I think that after that was when I went to that analytics panel I was telling you that was run by MatPat, which, you know, whatever you want to say about MatPat, he knows he runs a consultant. Like, the thing about game theory is not what makes MatPat rich. What makes MatPat rich is that he is a YouTube consultant who has like the greatest grasp of analytics of, like, I think him and his partner have like the tightest grasp on analytics I think of any two people in the world. So it was amazing to see that panel. We learned quite a lot from that. But yeah, then that night I was trying to see if I could do something with Harry, with H-Bomber Guy, or with Scott from NerdSync, but both of them were invited guests, so they were both at this hotel that I could not get in, or I found out I could get into, but I didn't think I could get into. So that ran dry. And so I was feeling, I think everyone's talking about how the hierarchy of VidCon is very sad. And that's true. And so, like, that night I got super, super, super sad and dejected because basically I was like, I want to hang out with my friends, but I'm not famous enough. So instead of... Is Scott from NerdSync a leftist? Yes, he is. Or he's at least getting there. All of his best friends are leftists, and he is definitely trying to sneak a lot more of it into his videos. But yeah, Scott is a huge BreadTube fan. So, yeah, I would say he's there. So is actually Ilkin, one of the creators of Kings and Generals. So there's a lot of stealth fandom of BreadTube that's behind the scenes. Okay, so that night, instead of getting to hang out with YouTube friends, I decided to go on a date with Kelly. We went to downtown Disney, we got some Mexican food, and then we went to bed. You know, usual stuff. And then the third day was super slow. Like, that was the day where, like, most of the panels were empty by that point because everybody has to relearn every year that the panels are dumb. So I spent a lot of time in the Room of Sadness. We had a breakfast with the Beats.
Oh, you forgot all about Will.
About Will?
Yeah.
Which Will? There's a lot of Wills.
When you were naming people. The Exploration.
Oh, yeah, Will Fox, the Exploration. Yeah, he was there. Yeah, because this is about to come up. So we had, like, breakfast with the Beats because they were about to take off back to Kansas a bit early. And then we went to Will Fox, my co-host of the former podcast YouTubers United and the runner of the Exploration. Him and I went to go have a business meeting. So we went to the Room of Sadness for that, and it was like having an episode of YouTubers United again, where we were talking about YouTube strategy and just went like hardcore, which was great. In the Room of Sadness, I happened to run into Sarah Zed and Maggie Mayfish, which made me very happy because I'm a very big fan of both of those YouTubers. But I have no, like Sarah Zed, I have only like 1 or 2 degrees of separation from, but like our mutual friend, all of our mutual friends weren't there. And so I was just like, hey, you don't know me, but we both know some of the same people. But I was like a really big fan. And so I got Kelly to come with me so that I wouldn't look so creepy, because I'm a large man walking up to two women who are hanging out silently and just being like, "Hey, I like your stuff," which, can give off big murder man vibes. So I got to say hi to them. That made me fun. That made me happy. That made me fun. That was a weird thing to say. And then, there was a lot. I recall there being a lot of sitting around on the third day of VidCon. Not a whole lot happened. And then, oh yeah. So then on the third day, there was the creator track reception, which was fun. We got there's a cash bar and there are some treats. So we had like one last good hangout with all of the education crowd who all hang out together during VidCon. And then I got invited to go to dinner with Scott and a bunch of Scott's friends. Basically, he wanted to have a dinner at... Apparently, his tradition is at the end of VidCon, he goes to dinner at Denny's with all of the people that he didn't get to see or the people that he wanted to see at VidCon. And so he invited me along to that. And we found out later that YouTube was gonna pay the bill, so that was nice. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about Denny's in America. They're way more common than they are in Canada. That's all I gotta say. So when Scott says, "Meet me at Denny's," and then we walk to Denny's to find out he's at the wrong Denny's. Or we're at the wrong Denny's, I should say. So Scott... So I got the Mario thing where I went into the Denny's and they said, "I'm sorry, your Scott is in a different Denny's." And I'm like, God damn it. So he's like, "No, we're on the Denny's on South Harbor Avenue," or whatever. And so I had to go because this thing is the thing about Anaheim with the Anaheim Convention Center is the Anaheim Convention Center takes up what would be like 10 blocks of a normal city. So it's impossible to cross it diagonally or anything like that. And, time was of the essence because they were waiting for us for dinner. So I went and grabbed a taxi to go to the Denny's on South Harbor Boulevard. And I was like, okay, fine. We did it. I didn't want to have to pay money for this taxi, but whatever, here we are. To find out, there is more than one Denny's on South Harbor Avenue. So I was in a second wrong Denny's. And the other Denny's, the other Denny's was a mile and a half away, which people seem to I don't know American lengths, so I don't remember how long a mile and a half is. And so I'm just like, okay, whatever, I'll walk it. And it took 20 minutes. It was 8:30 by the time I actually arrived at this dinner. And I finally got to this Denny's, and it was good. I had an amazing evening. I got to catch up with Scott, which I don't get to do enough. And I got to meet some awesome new people. I got to meet this awesome band where their shtick is that they always wear red shirts and black vests. And one of them gave me a lot of advice for how to buy a camera. And I got to meet, someone from Content Idea at YouTube, which was fun. And yeah, it was just good dinner evening thing. No booze, but it was just a good evening. I always get really nervous when someone else is paying for my meal. So when I know that they don't comp, or when your meal is being comped by somebody, I'm just I'll have the water and a diet kale. So I was I was nervous about all the things I was getting. So after, and then kind of towards the end of the dinner, two more of those networkers came to the table because they saw that we were wearing badges, and that a few of us were wearing yellow and orange badges. and like the clear hierarchy of VidCon. So then they came to the table, invited themselves to our table, and basically talked our ear off for like almost 25 minutes. And it was really awkward, and it was just like, why are you doing this? And it made me very uncomfortable. And then then it was finally over. And VidCon was then, then I went and took a taxi back to my hotel room, and it was just lovely. Then the next day I went home, and I'm still jet lagged now. So that was my VidCon. That was the answer to my first question I got tonight, which was, how was VidCon? So that was the story. That was the story of everything I did. And it was pretty good. I'm going to try and be more of a self-advocate this year and see if I can not be blocked out of that hotel this next time. That's my hope. Because I have friends who can help with that. And I just need to find a way to be more of a person who asks for things. Okay. So, Alex the Czarist asks, what do you think about Tsarism? I think it is bad. I think that emperors and kings are bad, and that they should not be things. Okay. Why did Andrew Jackson get so much popular support when he had more in common with the supposed elites before him than to most poor whites? Branding, yo. It's all about branding. You don't have to not be an elite. Look at the president now. You just have to act like you're against the elites and use that as your campaigning thing, and people will fall for it because a lot of people aren't all that good at critical thinking. Alright. Last week, people on BreadTube were saying the way ThoughtSon defines anarchism, being against unjust hierarchies, is meaningless because everyone is against unjustified stuff. Response. So, I mean, I think you're talking about the ThoughtSon video that came out while I was away on misconceptions about anarchism. And unjustified hierarchies is one aspect of anarchism. I would add that if you really, really want to get pedantic about it, that the other side of that argument about no unjust hierarchies is the idea of that hierarchies need to have a burden of proof. Hierarchies have a burden of proof that needs to be established, and if they cannot be established, then they should be dismantled and replaced with something that is more horizontal and less hierarchical. Which means that in effect, that if a hierarchy cannot justify itself, i.e., it doesn't have an explicit reason for being a hierarchy as opposed to a not hierarchy, then it needs to be dismantled and replaced with a non-hierarchical structure. Because sometimes hierarchies are justified. A ship without a captain who can make orders is a ship that is going to sink into the ocean at some point. A toddler wandering into the streets, being grabbed by one of their parents to stop them, is technically a form of hierarchy, but it is not an unjust one. So, anarchists would start looking through all the hierarchies of the world and trying to see which ones are just or unjust. And if they are unjust, or if it can be done either similar or better with a less hierarchical structure, then do it. We are obliged to do it. Because anarchists believe that less hierarchy, the least amount of hierarchy that you can get, is better. That's the other side that I would say that. I don't think everyone is against unjust hierarchies. There are many people who love hierarchies because it puts them as the hierarch, as the archon, if you will, as the one who rules. And very often, the idea of taking down an unjust hierarchy means that some people lose their power over others. And some people really get off on that shit. What would you do if Kelly became a Q conspiracy theorist? Oh boy. I would have some serious questions about how, one of the smartest people I've ever met would go towards, like, something so obviously dumb. Don't exactly know. I feel like the only way that Kelly could become a Q conspiracy theorist is if sometime at her work she accidentally put she was like for some reason putting sand on top of like a railroad charge, and it shot a metal pole through her head, which did a ton of brain damage, but somehow she survived, and then it drastically alters her personality. That's the only way I think that it would be about Q. She would actually become a Q conspiracy theorist, in which case you just kind of have to talk about brain damage. I would just be like if Kelly actually became a Q conspiracy theorist overnight, I would actually think that she might have had a stroke, or that she might have gotten brain damage somehow. I can't stay long. Job interview tomorrow. Only one question. Did the Epstein case change your opinion on sex work? Why isn't the commodification of sex just commercialized rape? Well, here's the thing, Gad Yariv. The Epstein case does not change my opinion on sex work, because those are not sex workers, those are exploited children. Children cannot consent to sex. Children cannot consent to sex work. They are incapable of doing so. They are children. Sex work that is done by workers, preferably unionized workers, would not end up being child sex slaves like what was happening in Epstein's case. All right. The Spanish Civil War and Revolutionary Catalonia were two separate things, correct? A liberal blames Catalonians for being taken over by the fascist state. How wrong is he? Oh, gosh. I know... Okay, I will say this. I know very, very, very little about this. The only thing I can say is that Catalonians were highly representative in the Republican side of the Spanish Civil War. That's about it. I can't really speak to many details on it. I did make a video on anarchists during the Spanish Civil War, but that wasn't really part of the research I did for the video, and that video I also did several years ago now, so I unfortunately can't really give you much of an answer. And I feel like I'd rather be honest than just make shit up, because that's not my style. Unless I thought of a funny answer, but I didn't. Wasn't there another president who was just as bad as the current one? Remember the Teapot Dome scandal, guys? Oh boy. I don't know if that was a question for me. What flag is that in the background? The red and black thing. Oh, that's an anarchist flag. The moon landing happened 50 years ago now, and the last person to be on the moon was in December of 1972. Why haven't other nations like Russia put their own person on the moon? Well, a couple reasons. One, it's really expensive to put people on the moon. And two, I was talking about this at VidCon, actually. The moon program was more or less a PR front for making intercontinental ballistic missiles. And then after they went to the moon, the right to comment first on the moon was done. And really, the technology of the time meant that there was no real good reason to go to the moon. Like, now we're just coming around to going back to the moon because we're just now getting to the point where we can do it up to modern safety standards compared to safety standards back then. But on top of that, we also are trying to look for a certain type of helium that exists on the moon and to use it as a springboard for leaving the Earth system and going to places like Mars. Which, like, we didn't have the technology to do any of that stuff safely, like, until not even now, I would say. So, for the longest time, the Americans had already been on the moon, and there's really no point in going to the moon otherwise. So, what would be the reason to do it? Especially because in the 1970s, people kind of stopped caring. And no one's been as excited about space since, like, 1969. I listened to a podcast that suggested that instead of packing, the next Democratic government should limit the SCOTUS's jurisdiction so much they effectively have no power. Thoughts on that idea? I don't know. That's a very, like, it's a very technical question. Like, the main issue is the Supreme Court is a partisan Republican government structure. And that right now it is controlled by primarily conservatives. And that is not exactly supposed to be the way that it was drawn out to be. It was drawn out to be a nonpartisan, impartial interpreters of the Constitution. It's not a thing it's ever been, but that's the thing it's supposed to be. So, people have suggested different aspects. And some people, like myself, would take more of a practical approach because I don't actually think that the American government works. I actually think the checks and balances are long dead, and are not, and like America's government was designed for an extremely different age that is not now, and now with relatively ideologically unified political parties, the checks and balances systems, like things like what the role of the Supreme Court play, end up being log jams better than they end up being like actual checks on power, because all you need to do is get one party, the Republicans in this case, to have all branches of government, and then they could just do whatever they want. So, there are two ways to play that when it comes to dealing with the Supreme Court. You can either admit that it's a political body, in which case, the fact that the Supreme Court is not limited in how big it can be means that you can just add more Supreme Court justices until it gets to a size you like and it has the kind of balance you like, because the Supreme Court, the size of the Supreme Court is a norm, it's not a rule. FDR threatened to do this if the Supreme Court wouldn't pass his New Deal legislation, and eventually they caved before he would do it. This idea that they're trying to put forward is limiting the SCOTUS's jurisdiction so much they'd effectively have no power. I mean, that, I guess, is a solution, but, like, then you're basically giving up, like, okay, then we can admit we don't want to make the Supreme Court political, but we just want it to have no ability to adjudicate what is not and was not constitutional. Because I don't know of a way of doing that doesn't also involve a lot of things getting bounced down to be decided by the states. And I don't know if you know about states, but a lot of them suck. Like, if it was up to states to decide whether or not they're going to do abortion, a lot of them won't. And so, like, I don't actually understand what the Supreme Court, if you need, the number one answer is tear down the government, anarchist utopia, because this is an intentionally dysfunctional system that makes no sense. But in my mind, if you admit that the U.S. government is a dysfunctional system that makes no sense, then really, it doesn't really matter what the hell you do, because the institution is pointless. So just add more Supreme Court judges that could do the right thing. Do the thing that you want to do. It's just like the Senate or the House. You just change things until you get what you want. Because what's it called? Right now, the United States is completely goddamn paralyzed. And it will be until one party controls literally everything, and then they will become dictators for life. How do you feel about being in the cool club of YouTube now? Is it a significant achievement, in your opinion, to be a full-time YouTuber? Without a play button. I think it's a significant achievement to be a full-time YouTuber. I think that, especially when I get to the point where we're a bit more comfortable financially, I think that I'm kind of building it up to that, and I think I can build up to that in the relative near-term future. But it is a thing I'm pretty blown away by. I've been thinking about it for so long that now it just feels normal in my head. But it is quite a special thing to be able to do. And I mean, not everyone gets to have enough people like their internet stuff that they want to give them enough money that they can live. That's very, very rare. Yeah. But keep in mind, it's a thing that I barely do, and it's a thing that a lot of my friends already do. So it's like a thing to me. It's like it's very much it's the people. I know a lot of YouTubers, and I know a lot of full-time YouTubers, and so that it'll kind of the comparativeness sort of loses its effect. But sometimes you have to sit back and appreciate how rare of a thing it is to actually be able to do it. Will you ever cover / know any resources for the MMIWG inquiry and surrounding context?
It's the murder and missing Indigenous women and girls.
Oh gosh. Will I ever cover? Well, I can't say will I ever cover something. Do I know any resources? I do not. I know that it's woefully underfunded. But it's really outside of my area of expertise, so I can't really speak much about it. Remember, you make a page for video suggestion? Have you make any video from that list? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have looked at it. It's not, in my mind, with the way things are right now, I can't really field suggestions in any systematic fashion. Kind of just have to let them wash over me and see which ones latch onto my brain. Because at the moment, I have to start choosing. I have to make my videos strategically. I have to make my videos. I have to make my videos in a way that I have to choose. There's lots of factors for why I choose to make videos. Many of which involve, can I make this into something good? And is this something that I want to make? Which can't really be quantified in a way that I think I can make an Excel file or something to fix. So in my mind, I'm just, if you say them in a thing, I will try to remember it. And if it's something that comes back to me when I'm thinking of what I'm going to do next for this series or whatever, then who knows, I could do it someday. Thoughts on BreadTube. Thoughts on some of the problematic people in BreadTube/LeftTube. Thoughts on Vouch. I'm guessing you mean Vouch. BreadTube. So BreadTube, the subreddit, as far as I know, is, I mean, the fact that there is a insurgent leftist YouTube makes me very happy. The BreadTube community, the subreddit, I don't have much experience with, but what little I do, I do remember coming across a BreadTube discussion about how they were all saying that I was a liberal, which I didn't much appreciate. But, and also when it comes to quote-unquote problematic people in BreadTube/LeftTube, I don't know exactly who you're referring to, nor exactly do I want to start shit with people. That's not really my speed. It's probably why I'm such a small YouTuber. As for Vaush, he seems like he's kind of shit because, you know, transphobia and such. But that's about all the things I can say on that. I don't really want to get into drama. Drama's not my thing. I don't even, like, eavesdrop and, like, anything like that. Like, I don't know. I haven't seen any... I think this might be, like, trying to dance around some sort of drama that might have happened on Twitter that I don't know about because I wasn't here. I'm seeing a lot of orbs in the chat. That is very good. Okay. What is California like? I always wanted to visit that state. It's nice. It's hot. It's dry. There's lizards. I think it's fine. I have no problem with it. I go to California once a year now, and I've always been happy. I've never had a negative experience I've probably had some negative experiences at California, but California, overall it seems pretty nice. LA kind of sucks, but the rest of it's all right. I'm from Cuba, living in Florida. Oh my, I think that there was someone else. I think that's, what's it called? Ariel Fernandez or whatever. He's another Cuban who lives from Florida who's usually in the chat. From my observations, Afro-Cubans and whites are part of the same culture. We have the same costumes and interests. We all get along. Why is that? I don't know. Communism, maybe? The fact that you both lived under a unfair racial hierarchy in colonial Spain? I don't know. The first time anyone ever explained the idea of communism to me, I thought, but if no one can be rich, I can't ever be. To what extent do you think anti-communism comes down to such thinking? I don't think it comes down to that. Okay, so, like, this is, like, a thing that comes up a lot where, like the kind of John Steinbeck argument that, like, America can't become communist because it's a bunch of people who think that they're going to be millionaires someday. And I'm pretty sure most Americans don't think that they're going to be rich someday. There are a few that are. They're kind of dumb, but you know who they are. Like, most Americans are pretty well established that they're not going to be rich. What really is the thing that leads to anti-communism is an idea that it comes back to, and this is like unimaginable how super important this video was by Innuendo Studios, called There's Always a Bigger Fish, and about how the conservative mindset and the idea that the world is supposed to be hierarchical, and that if there are people higher on the hierarchy than they think they're supposed to be, than they're supposed to be, that's going to lead to chaos, and that's going to lead to bad things. Or as an old paleoconservative would say, it would lead to anarchy. So, I do think that many anti-communists put a lot of their identity in not thinking that they're going to be rich, but knowing that they are at least comfortable being higher up on the hierarchy than some people. Most of the time, people, even if they're not rich, they can still say, well, I'm better off than people of color. Or if they're people of color, then you could say, well, at least I'm not poor, or at least I'm not a woman of color. And then if you're at the actual like bottom of the bottom, you're just so run down that thinking about politics is a luxury you probably can't afford most of the time. So, oh, I skipped a question. Sorry. I'll be back to your question, Leonardo. So there's that, and then there was a strong anti-communist propaganda campaign done by the West during the Cold War, so that a lot of people don't know what communism is, but they're very sure they know that it's bad, without actually any knowledge of what the thing is. And then when you do tell them, it's like a bunch of like grade school arguments in favor of capitalism, which can fall apart because they're about as thick as tissue paper. But yeah, it's a mix of propaganda and people who benefit from class hierarchies within their society. How do you get a multiracial monoculture? If possible in Cuba, then why not in America? I can't really speak to how it worked in Cuba, to be honest. Are you feeling better now? I'm like 95% of the way there. I don't feel bad anymore. The only thing that's left of the cold that I had is that I've got a lot of clogs. I'm still coughing up stuff. I still have sinuses full of crap. But for the most part, I don't feel tired. I don't feel sick. I don't have a sore throat or anything like that. A lawyer/podcaster I follow says the idea of rotating judges off of SCOTUS is definitely BS. Why can't you entertain the idea that Bernie made a mistake? He is 77. Why can't I entertain the idea that Bernie made a mistake? Just because a podcaster you follow disagrees? I just disagree with the premise. I mean, what's it called? Bernie Sanders is not the only person who advocates packing the courts. There's a lot of people who advocate for it. What's it called? Like I said, it was proposed by FDR. It's just in my mind, it's just the most efficient solution to a system that is fundamentally broken at its core. So there's really no point in making it work. But I'm not under any delusions that the Supreme Court actually works the way that it's intended to. It's just a legislative body. And it's a legislative body where people serve for life. And that's it. What's Downtown Disney? Downtown Disney is a part of Disneyland that you can get into without having to pay for a ticket. So there's some shows, there's some stores, there's some restaurants. Everything's really expensive. That's about it. Do you think the depictions of late Soviet-era Russians in Stranger Things was problematic, i.e., excessively stereotypical? Yes. Yeah, it is pretty problematic. Okay, so there's a thin line, so you can go down where the portrayal of the Soviets in Stranger Things is supposed to, it's less of a portrayal, trying to be a historic portrayal of the Soviets. Okay, how do I explain this? Stranger Things is not really supposed to be a historical drama as much as it is supposed to be an homage to 80s movies. And in 80s movies, Soviets are stereotypical depictions of Russian people and evil for the sake of being evil. But I would argue that digging up that 80s movie trope to put into Stranger Things was problematic in ways that, there are 80s movie tropes that they have dodged around, especially around women and consent, which is good. That is a good thing that they are doing. But they, and also talking about race, which is nice, but they don't seem to say the same thing about I don't know. I don't know. So, like, I do think that there is a problematic perception. Although I'm hearing it's starting to backlash, and now, like, everybody is really into... Isn't everybody really into Alexi memes for some reason? I don't know. I still have 2 episodes left of Stranger Things to watch, so I don't really know what Alexi's, like, next steps are, but it seems like people are memeing him pretty hard for some reason. Okay. Wasn't the YouTube Guild dead? Yes, I do think it is. There was a notification that went out, like, maybe, like, yesterday or the day before, that a group called the Internet Creators Guild is going to be dissolved. So there's no more Internet Creators Guild. But YouTube is still around. Just that group is going away. What are some of your favorite uplifting historical facts to wash the room of sadness out of our brains? Sure. Let's think. I think that, you know, the fact that the Confederate statues are only like 50-something years old is a nice thing, because it means that that kind of Confederate nostalgia might be a little bit of an artificial adaptation. I think the fact that for 90+% of human existence, we lived in a more or less non-hierarchical society is pretty nice. The fact that, the historical fact that indigenous people before contact had no concept of property, or had very little concept of private property, at least in North America, which I think is promising. Think that the fact that whenever somebody is a dictatorial, authoritarian, that there is always a resistance to it is uplifting. And things like the New Deal and things like that make me think that actually, like, big projects are actually possible, which I think is a good thing. Why aren't there enough gay leftists / communists? From my point of view, mainstream gay men culture is super liberal materialistic. I don't know. That's a good question, though. Why? I don't know. Mainstream gay men... Well, mainstream of everything culture is super liberal and materialistic. But there is something to be said that, like, that to a small extent, especially cis gay men who are well off, have sort of left the rest of their LGBTQ plus allies behind. And that's how you end up with people like Milo Snuffleupagus. Q conspiracy theory. What is this? Oh boy. I feel like I should do this at some point. So Q conspiracy theory is that if you remember Pizzagate from a few years ago, after Pizzagate, or maybe even before Pizzagate, there's this poster on 8chan who just went by the name of Q. 8chan, by the way, is a place where you can be anonymous and name yourself anything. And Q, this Q person has been saying that like Hillary Clinton and the Democrats are all involved in some like mega uber like child sex Satan worshipping thing. And that Donald Trump is going to get to the bottom of it when he's president. So what happens is people who say that they're Q post on 8chan these like random cryptic messages, and it has led to an entire cottage industry of conspiracy theorists who read into these messages, who think that there's like secrets behind every door, and yeah, it has ballooned out of control, especially because 8chan people, like, I mean, 8chan people are 8chan people, but the fact that they're starting to court boomers, and everyone knows boomers aren't that good at critical thinking, so they just buy it, and then then they make it dumb, and they wear Q glasses and stuff like that, and so it's like, now, what started on 8chan as a thing for dumb people on 8chan has now spread itself to, like, conservative boomers, and now it's like a whole thing. And, like, it was 4chan leaking onto Facebook and leaking into right-wing boomer brains that led to Donald Trump getting elected in the first place. The breadtubers were saying real anarchists are against hierarchies as such, i.e. all of them. Response to that idea. That's not philosophically sound. To be against all hierarchies, like all of them, would be silly. Like, you would, like, many, like for example, there is a hierarchy implicit in the fact that people have expertise. You wouldn't dismiss somebody's expertise because you're just against the concept of hierarchies. Like, the idea that hierarchies need to justify themselves in order to exist is a good answer. To say that you're against all hierarchies without any nuance or context whatsoever is childish. And if there is an anarchist who would say that they are against all hierarchies, whether or not they're justified, sounds like more like a teenager than like an actual, like, grown-up who studies political philosophy. Thoughts on gaming companies not wanting Trump's trade war with China and urging gamers to oppose his trade war? I mean, I don't have much thoughts on it. It's gaming companies just looking out for their own bottom line. Unfortunately, gamers are the worst people on Earth, so we'll see what happens. What is the best Aztec poem, and did you know that the Aztecs had philosophers? I don't know any Aztec poem. I know they did a lot of poetry. And yes, I did know that the Aztecs had philosophers. They were kind of like natural philosophers. Like, there's a lot of people who are thinking that if the Aztecs were able to continue going for a while, that they probably would have developed into some sort of like really basic scientists, which would have changed society quite a bit. There's a lot of evidence that if the Columbian Exchange hadn't happened when it did, that the Aztec society would have gone through some pretty massive changes in the not-too-distant future. Although, that being said, there are while there is like an Aztec science burgeoning and there are big developments happening, Aztec society, as it was at the time of conquest, was very unstable. The fact that Cortez was able to, with the small amount of people, topple the entire Triple Alliance Empire is due to the fact that they had a complex network of tributaries that were not exactly all that loyal to Tenochtitlan anyway. So, you know. I've noticed D&D books in your background. Are you a DM or a player, and how often do you play? Well, Jonathan, those are D&D books. I am a DM. I play 2 games a week, one where I'm a DM and one where I'm a player. But I will say, when it comes to like the amount of energy I put into the game, more energy goes into being a DM than a player. So that would be my answer. And I play on Wednesdays and Fridays. Why is it wrong to sacrifice people to Quetzalcoatl? Well, I would say that human sacrifice is not one of my favorite activities. That's for sure. Did Quetzalcoatl actually take human sacrifice? I guess he did. I mean, if all parties consent, more power to you, but, like, yeah, human sacrifice is, usually a sign of a lack of understanding of the way that weather patterns work. You see a lot of human sacrifice in places with really erratic weather patterns, like with Mexico with the El Nino effect, which is sort of a reaction to that, to weather, like being prone to drought and floods and things like that. Yeah. I mean, if all parties consent, I guess I don't really have, like, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to be practicing any human sacrifice anymore. I think we've kind of passed that part of our history. What got you interested in American politics in the first place? Being Canadian, obsessing over American politics is like our day-to-day, like, entertainment. But I spent a lot of time when I was a kid on road trips with my parents. So I've seen a lot of the United States. And I think that that combined with my growing up, like my formative teenage years were at the peak of the war on terror. 9/11 happened when I was 12. Wait, I want to say, yeah, almost 13, but I was 12. And like the Bush administration happened during like my teenage years. Those things combined made me very interested in American politics. Because I realized how important the stakes were pretty early. Where if I had been like 10 years older and a teenager in the 1990s, maybe it would have been less so. Kieran. That's a wonderful Irish name. What do you think? What do you think of that the UN has said that Australia is the worst country in the developed world for freedom of the press and journalist restrictions? Yeah. I mean, I know that there's some like serious like press censorship issues in Australia. Again, this isn't really an area that I know much about, but I have heard things like that. But honestly, Australia has concentration camps, so I don't know. Like, it'd be tough for me to trust a lot of the things from that government. Sorry, friends. Should the Democrats in the USA control all three branches of government since the Republicans are fascist? I mean, in the situation we're in, it would definitely be a bit of a stronger situation. So do we, says Logan. Well, so do you. I don't think Canada's got any concentration camps as far as I know. We probably got one somewhere that I'm not thinking of, which will make me sound like a real big dingus malingus in a second. Okay. Supreme Court had no power. A Democratic government could just undermine. All right. Oh wait. Let's go to the site. So the Democrats control the USA, all branches of government right now. Yes, and then that would open up the situation to start a left-wing party for the first time in American history. That'd be nice. All right. So if the Supreme Court had no power, a Democratic government could just undermine the state governments, and no one could help them. That was part of the idea. Yes. Thoughts on the eco-friendly policies in China? It's kind of interesting. If I remember correctly, that like China is like one of the most high-polluting countries on Earth and one of the number one investors in green energy on Earth, which I think is an interesting combination. But I don't exactly like China's. I don't know. China's in its own world. It's doing everything at such an unimaginable scale that I can't even picture how it's going to transition. But it's investing, which is like a thing that, you know, some countries like my own or like the United States are not doing, which is like, got to give it to them for that at least. Besides Bernie, who would be your top choice for the Democratic candidacy? Or better yet, what's your cracked crystal ball prediction? Current state of the race, I am still pretty convinced that Bernie is going to be one of the last two candidates left. All right, I'll answer your first one. If Bernie like evaporated into dust tomorrow and I had to choose another candidate to back, at this point I'd be a very reluctant, probably Elizabeth Warren supporter, because like at least Elizabeth Warren's pushing for a few things that like she shows like honest conviction that she wants to do. I would argue that I would probably be trying to be like, hey, should really push Elizabeth Warren to be a lot more universal in her programs and to stop with all the means testing. But she would be my, like, I guess, second choice, because at least like her moral North Star points in a direction that seems to be like, towards something that resembles justice, while everybody else would sell their grandmother if they could get another point in the polls. In fact, some of them did. Didn't like Kamala Harris basically like completely embarrass her father just so that she could get some cool person points. Yeah. And of course, the meme answer is always Marianne Williamson, the queen, the orb queen, our spirit queen of Ontario, of Canada or America, and that she should just be. If I think that if the Democratic race is teaching us anything, is that America should become a constitutional monarchy, or should I say, constitutional matriarchy, where you have an elected president who does the day-to-day, but then every Christmas day you get a radio address or a TV address from Marianne Williamson, the Queen of America, which would be, I think, the best arrangement. Like, I don't want Marianne Williamson to be president, but I definitely want her to be a constant and important figure on the media landscape. If there's a way we can do that, I would be very happy. Would you consider covering the leftist rural grassroots movement in the late 19th century? Maybe. That is a thing I might consider doing. It's an interesting period in history, that's for sure. With the populists and, like, Victoria... What the hell is her last name? Victoria Woodhull? The first woman to ever run for president, anyway. Pretty cool stuff. Explain the orb meme. It's like a Chapo Trap House meme about Marianne Williamson because she's like a new ager, so it's all about crystal balls and spirit orbs and things like that. And then there's orb emojis. It seems to infuriate people, but and then like also the fact that the orb meme is becoming a thing, but then the viewing globe became a thing, and so now with the Ancient Aliens video being a meme and the Marianne Williamson orbs being a meme, that now there's no bad time to post an orb emoji. That's just the answer in my mind. Best Buddhist branch. Theravada Buddhism gang for me. Imagine not liking the Pali Canon. Or are you a Mahayana? I'm not a Buddhist. I was a Buddhist when I was a kid. And I remember being into Theravada Buddhism when I was like 14. But I don't think I really knew anything about it. So that's my answer. Honestly, I have to go into research for it, and I don't think I'm going to do, well, I'm on the fence about whether to do a part 2 of Buddhism or to just move to another subject, because I gotta cover more religions before Kogito gets them all. Thought on D.H. Lawrence. Is he sexist? Will you read this fig poem on stream? No. I don't know if D.H. Lawrence, was he sexy? Was he sexist? Probably. Was he sexy? Probably not. I would probably not read his fig poem on stream. Bernie didn't talk about packing the court. He talked about throwing judges off of the court. Yeah, whatever Bernie's thing is, I don't particularly like. That's Bernie's position. Doesn't have to be mine. I think Bernie doesn't go far enough. I think Bernie's issue. The reason why Bernie isn't doing as well as he should be in the polls is because he's too soft. He's not going hard enough. I want Bernie from the 1980s who like called out America for backing right-wing death squads in Nicaragua. This Bernie is trying to like be too nice and appeal to too many people, and still calls like Joe Biden his friend. And it's like, fuck that. The guy loves segregation. You should like give him shit. Like give him hard shit and say, I would not consider my friend anybody who supports segregationists. But Bernie is so goddamn from Vermont, and he hates confrontation, and he hates negative campaigning. So he's just like being Bernie. Just wish he wasn't such a goddamn hippie sometimes. It could just be an angry leftist like I want. Oh well. How do you feel about some liberals writing articles about how mentally ill Trump is? Wouldn't this have the potential to hurt vulnerable people who are mentally ill due to changing public perception? Laura was here. There's a little bit of that, I would imagine. I know that there was much more of that when liberals who claimed that they were woke and tolerant and accepting were making lots of jokes about Trump and Vladimir Putin being gay. But there's a thin line between calling Trump all these all these things, which I think is wrong to do without basis. But then there's actually like some psychiatrists who have written articles and stuff like that about them having serious concerns about Donald Trump's mental stability. But they're psychiatrists. I feel like they're the only people who should really be saying things like that. Like, I still hate that I sometimes say the word crazy. I think I should stop doing that. But it's a very hard one for me to kick for some reason. We have concentration camps for migrants right now, and there isn't enough people protesting in the street. Is this enough to lose faith for the combined goodness of humanity? I think that it is a good sign of the power of propaganda. I don't think I'm ready to lose faith in humanity quite yet. I think that this is, what's it called? This is like a thing. I'm not as depressed as some people are. I think that there's powerful people who are very, very lost. And using fear for political purposes. And I say that it would be very easy to use love for political purposes. And sir, love will win. That's my answer. Yesterday in a stream with Kevin Logan, Carl Ghosn claimed that the Roman Empire had strong borders. How would you respond to that idea, i.e. if you were a sensible person, not Carl? First of all, what? Second of all, no. Like, first of all, okay, let me, like, those actually were answers. So number one, what? Like, who gives a shit what the Roman Empire did? They haven't been around for over 1,000 years, and trust me, like, most of the things that Rome did are not things we should be trying to emulate. Second, no, because the, like, Roman Empire had, like, massive borderlands. Like, the fact that they call, like, oh my god, the Roman Empire always had a massive frontier. It was the only reason it was so successful. It was the reason why, like, barbarian hordes were always wandering around in the frontier lands. Like, there was no, like, there's, like, Hadrian's Wall, I guess, but there was, like, in, like, Germania, do you really think that there was, like, a strong border? They were, like, constantly fighting in their own borders. I don't know. This is ridiculous. This is not an answer. Carl is a terrible, terrible, terrible man. And he's very bad at doing research, and so this shouldn't surprise anyone. So first of all, his thing is saying that a literal empire that, like, crucified people and, like, conquered and oppressed peoples across the Mediterranean world is somehow something to emulate. And then the second thing he says shows that he doesn't do any research, because he doesn't. He doesn't even know, he can't, it's been shown, it has been demonstrated in video format that he doesn't even finish the abstract of articles he reads. So, just assume Carl is lying or just too lazy to actually find out what the right answer is. Just assume everything he's saying is either wrong or a lie until proven otherwise. If he said the sky was blue, I would actually have to take a minute. Ben Borscht. I don't think there's. I think I just added the borscht part in there, but I'm just gonna roll with it because I don't know. I haven't had borscht in a long, long time. Okay. Instead of storming Area 51, shouldn't we storm the concentration camps instead? Yeah, that would be a good idea. Storm all concentration camps. Free those people. Let loose the masses yearning to breathe free, and let them into the land of liberty. Or are you some sort of despot? Do you think men and women will always have a hierarchy between them? I certainly hope not. If we can get to our sci-fi future and transcend gender, that would be nice. But I would hope that I mean as long as there are different roles based on what category you were assigned at birth. Yeah, there's always gonna be some friction. I hope it doesn't. I hope that there's a way that we can all be peaceful and happy and love and orbs. All right. How do violent rituals come about anyway? Wouldn't we be hardwired to not want to hurt fellow humans because it would be against our best interests? So human sacrifice, I almost went into this as my subject. I was interested in the topic of human sacrifice. That was going to be an alternate reality Tristan who transferred from Bishops and got a degree in archaeology and went to grad school and everything like that, would be an archaeologist studying this question. And I think it has to do, I do have strong ideas about the nature aspect. So a lot of things. So it's a form of magic, and magic is in a archaeological sense or an anthropological sense. Magic is when somebody tries to impose their will on the universe, typically because something is in a way that is not good. Which means that if you find human sacrifice in the archaeological records and you find records of gods that ask for human sacrifice, this is a sign that you are in a society that is experiencing, usually because of farming, some sort of major natural disaster. You start to see human sacrifice and gods that demand human sacrifice when there are lots of natural disasters, or when there's massive climate change going on in an area or something like that. It's a sign of stress and panic. But in Mesoamerica, it's extremely prevalent as an institution, which means it built upon itself as well. But I think it has to do with the fact that in Mexico specifically, they have a very, because of the El Nino effect, there is an extremely irregular pattern of rain and drought, which leads to magical thinking and magical attempts to try and get the desired outcomes. It's sort of like a cultural version of this experiment that was done once with pigeons, where they first thing they would do is they would train the pigeons by every time they pushed a button with their beak, they would get food. Then they stopped doing that, and they started giving the pigeons food like randomly, like every so often. And pigeons started becoming like YouTubers, in that whatever they were doing when they got the food, they would just start developing these superstitious habits to do it. So if they were preening their feathers when they got fed, they would start to make an association, and then they would start preening their feathers all the time, or they would start pecking all the time, or whatever it was that they were doing. They would start making that association. And in my mind, that sort of building up was probably what led to the development of human sacrifice as a cultural practice. Because when there isn't a scientific concept, a scientific theory of weather or climate, then everything seems sort of arbitrary and is based on like empirical cause and effect. And so they would develop superstitions. That's how many superstitions, I think, were developed. And in many ways, the more impactful thing that you were doing when the thing happens, like, for example, there is a good sign that, like, in alternative medicine, like in medicine that doesn't actually do anything, that if the medicine makes you feel something unpleasant, like if it makes you feel pain or if it makes you feel discomfort, there's a higher chance that you're going to think it's going to work. And I don't exactly know what the psychological principle of that part is, but there's something to that. And so something extreme like human sacrifice will, then if that connection is made with like the change in the weather, that'll make them like, try to change their way. All right. Weren't there sterilizing of First Nations just a couple of years ago in Canada? Yes, there was. That was going on until shockingly recent. What do you think of abolishing political parties altogether and forming a consensus government like the Northwest Territories has? That would be nice. It's, unfortunately, with the way that political interests work and the way that money works, it's not feasible in the way that governments work right now. Wait, what did Kamala Harris do with her dad? It had to do with cannabis. Basically, she in an interview said that she, because her dad was Jamaican, that she, like, loved cannabis. She's like, yeah, cannabis is fine. Like, my dad's Jamaican. I'm half Jamaican. It's fine. When, like, apparently her dad really, like, basically she, like, stereotyped her Jamaican father, who is an economics professor, she's like kind of like sold out her Jamaican heritage in order to make like a funny media thing, and apparently her father really didn't appreciate that. That's it though. Does Canada have the idea of becoming a republic after Queen Elizabeth dies, like Australia, sort of? I don't think so. Canada's super loyalist, and like, I don't really, like, I know that some countries are likely to probably experiment with becoming a republic after the Queen dies, but there is no talk of that happening in Canada, and I really highly doubt it will happen. Canada's going to be, like, the UK is going to get rid of the Queen before we do. What will happen if Trump gets reelected? I don't know. I don't know what will happen in the democratic world. That'll be fascinating. But, as for, like, the world, oh, things are going to be rough. And I do think that, given that, like, if Kamala Harris, like, who I think is, like, the most likely to be a serious contender against Sanders for the nomination, if she wins, it's, like, almost guaranteed that Donald Trump will win the election. So, it's not an unlikely scenario. Because Democrats are going to make the same mistakes over and over and over again, as they always do. And the election will happen, and the Democrats will blame everyone but themselves, and we'll spend 4 more years going through 4 more years of bullshit. And then when Donald Trump tries to run for a third term, we'll all freak out. And then, I don't know, you probably won't be able to because he's not allowed to. And I don't think that the Supreme Court is that on his side, that they'll walk away from something that obviously dictatorial. Then, on that note, we'll go through the same shit and we'll be dealing with the same dumb things over and over and over again, forever and ever, until we all drown because we melted all the ice caps. That's my answer. Were your parents Buddhists or did you convert? No, my parents are not Buddhists. They never have been. That was me experimenting with spirituality when I was 14. Like, my dad is not religious at all. He basically is exactly what I am now, an apatheist, someone who doesn't particularly give a shit about whether or not God exists. It doesn't really affect their life. But my mom is like a new age spiritualist person who knew who Marianne Williamson was. So, like, I remember, like, all of the weird psychic stuff and crystals and things like that when I was a kid that I'm sure I'll be explaining to a psychiatrist someday. So, my religious upbringing wasn't exactly, like, normal either. Truth is in the eye of the beholder. As a DM, how many times have you unleashed beholders on an unsuspecting party? Only once. And actually, the beholder was the mayor of a town. I have never actually, like, ran the fight with the IRAs yet. I kind of want to someday, but the campaign I'm running right now is pretty far from dealing with beholders. At least at the moment. I can't really think about beholders being a thing for them in the near-term future. But you never know. It's always fun to throw a beholder when you least expect it. What's wrong with the word crazy? It is a word that stigmatizes mental illness. That's about it. I've been told by viewers that it's not exactly a polite thing to say. But it's gonna be a hard thing to change because we're running out. It turns out that every word that we use to dramatize something, or to or for hyperbole or emphasis, is in some way oppressive, and so we're running out of words, and so we're gonna have to think of some new ones. How do reactionaries know how to rig the YouTube algorithm so much? Oh, that's a good answer. That's a good question. So the reason why the right is so successful at YouTube is because, first of all, they can is mostly because they can do what YouTube wants. The YouTube algorithm, if the YouTube algorithm was getting exactly what it wanted, you would be making high volume, high quality content. i.e., you'd be making very well produced, long content all the time. So, people like Steven Crowder and them, who get a lot of money from like the Koch brothers and stuff like that, can hire editors, can buy nice sets, can get all those things going for them. And so they make 2-hour-long YouTube videos that are highly produced and talk about, topical stories of the day, which is like the number one thing that the YouTube algorithm will push. And so that's why they know that, like, hey, this Steven Crowder video gets like buttloads of watch time. So anybody who watches something about a modern day like event, it's going to want to push on them. While left tubers, for the most part, actually I think for all of the parts, left tubers don't have money. They don't have Koch. There's no leftist Koch brothers. So they don't have the resources to do that. So they're trying to scratch by and make a living. And they can't hire editors. And so you end up with just it being harder to crack into the industry. Is American hegemony coming to an end? And if yes, what will be the status quo? Depending upon who you ask, the kind of like the geopolitics people I know are talking about moving towards what's called the multipolar world, where by the end of the century we're expected to have multiple different major powers that will vie for different areas or zones of influence, which was sort of the way the Victorian world worked. Specifically, there's a lot of talk about the BRICS countries, which is a acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These are economies that are ready for major population explosions, but at the same time are also highly developed. There's also a lot of talk about a major population explosion going on in West Africa, as now a lot of the African continent, but West Africa in particular, is starting to get plugged into global capitalism in a more like solid way. And so it's like places like Nigeria, for example, are developing at a astonishingly fast rate. And some countries like Cote d'Ivoire are resulting in people thinking that French might be the most widely spoken language by the year 2100, which would be interesting. And the reason why is because as economies develop, their birth rates start to drop off. But in West Africa, where majority of the countries there speak French, they're going to go through the phase of industrialization and all that kind of stuff that results in massive increases in birth rates. So there's a thought that, like, while the rest of the world is getting older and having fewer kids, that these countries in West Africa are going to have a huge population boom, and before very long, that will result in a lot of like influence of West African culture in the world, and a lot of and widespread use of the French language, which, you know, that's kind of cool. I wouldn't mind that. But yeah, so this is all like the ideas of where geopolitics is going in the 21st century. Doesn't typically explain or cover for things like anthropogenic climate change and massive things that are going to cause huge disruptions in the global economy and the way things run. But that's like the idea these days. Is that as American hegemony kind of comes to an end, you're going to start seeing Brazil becoming more of a regional power. You're going to see Russia influencing more, which is already starting to happen. Same with China. India as well. India probably will start taking a larger role in the local area. And South Africa as well. So this is a thing that could happen. Yeah, Logan said, I fucking hate that most people speak the language of their colonizers rather than the native language of the region. And that's true, Logan. I know that is a concerning thing. What it does do, though, is that in a lot of these countries, like a lot of countries, for example, Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire has dozens of indigenous languages. It is a country purely created from French colonization. So when it becomes an independent state, French is like the only language that unifies them, and so that's what they go with. It's not a great answer, but it works, and language is a tool, and so if it works for them, I guess it works for them. Plus, it's great because also it's a quick way for a lot of these countries to be able to plug themselves into the global economy in a faster way. I would rather people from Cote d'Ivoire speak French and are able to use that to benefit themselves and their economy and their people then having their indigenous languages become a thing, but then like they need to learn a second language just to be able to do things on the international stage, if that makes sense. Okay, what's the next thing? What country do you think will be the first to swing to socialism? I think it's going to be the United States or the United Kingdom. The United States has a socialist political candidate who is the most popular politician in America. Americans are very idealistic in their culture, and I think that there is a very easy way to make the American argument for socialism. That socialism is about justice, it's about freedom, it's about love for your fellow man, like all of those, the American way. Freedom, socialism. And I mean, American socialists have made this argument for a very long time that goes back all the way to the 19th century. So I think that America culturally could be very ready for socialism. The UK could become socialist because the UK is about to go through probably one of the darkest periods of its existence. You thought like the blackouts of the 1970s were bad. Just wait until you get your hard Brexit, buddy. And I think that the backlash against like the ominous, inevitable Prime Minister, freaking, what the hell's his name right now? Boris Johnson, and like the darkness coming is going to lead to such bad conditions that I think a socialist uprising, especially with Jeremy Corbyn having such influence, could definitely turn into something a lot nicer. So I would say that the UK, for different reasons, the UK and the United States are probably the most likely. I don't know about some of the other countries. Maybe France. France has a strong left-wing current that is not afraid to use its weight, and so I could see France doing it too. All right, where are we? Oh, yes. Thoughts on the Carthaginian salt memes? Are they problematic? I haven't seen any Carthaginian salt memes. I have been out of touch with my history memes in the last little bit. I don't know if they're problematic. I could see a way that they could be. That's for sure. The whole salt the earth thing. Have you seen that new Bernie McDonald's campaign ad? No, I have not. Does the networking system disadvantage those who have bad social issues? I think having bad social skills shouldn't affect your career prospects. Yeah, definitely. Having bad social skills will damage your career prospects in the world we live in. It's not the fair thing. It's just the true thing. Just like being ugly negatively affects your career prospects. The only difference between those two, though, is that social skills are something you can work at. So maybe you're not amazing at it, but it is a thing you can work on. It is a thing you can develop. It is a skill. It is not a innate feature of your personality. So it is a thing that you can develop. Let's see. Why is British Columbia such a powerful force in Canadian politics? Is it? I mean, it's one of the most populous provinces. That's why. It's like, isn't it the third most populous province? Oh, maybe fourth because of Alberta. I don't know. I don't typically think of British Columbia as being a powerful force in Canadian politics, to be honest. Why is American history so disappointing? Every moment there's a revolutionary movement, it's either crushed or stifled. Two reasons. American culture is extremely kowtowed and very deferential to authority, and has been basically since the Revolution. It was a rich man's revolution, and it was a conservative revolution against forces of taxation. The other reason is because the United States had the most violent labor movement in the world's history. The attempt for people in America to unionize and to work for workers' things was met with such violence that there's sort of a beaten down effect for a lot of workers today. What do you think about Bernie praising the Canadian healthcare system so much? Are you worried that this can stop us from wanting to improve? I mean, I think that it works for Bernie. I think it works for America. I think that America, if it were to move to a Canadian healthcare system, would improve American healthcare quite a bit. But I don't imagine that Bernie would argue that the Canadian healthcare system is perfect. And I do think that the Canadian healthcare system is very imperfect. It has a lot of issues that need to be improved. But I think those are different conversations. And I think that saying just because the Canadian healthcare system isn't perfect, that it's not like a massive upgrade to what the United States has, which is nothing at the moment, except for like GoFundMe, then I think that there's a lot of room for positivity there. Okay. Let's see. Should we be worried about the fact that those BRIC countries don't have much respect for things like racial or sexual diversity? We should always be afraid or nervous that powerful countries don't have much respect for things like racial or sexual diversity. Like the United States, for example. America mostly gives lip service to those things. But like, yeah, the idea of South Africa being a world power is kind of terrifying. If the way that like, you know, if white people complain about their conspiracy theories. But South Africa isn't white people; it's majority black. So I think it'll be. But yeah, there's problematic stuff that'll definitely be a thing. I don't think America was particularly good at enforcing its ideas of individual rights anyway, so I don't think it'll make that much of a difference, to be honest. It's just one is gonna like bullshit less about it. Okay. So that is the end of the questions I have. So I think we're at 9 o'clock. It's been a couple hours. I think it's about as good a time as any to call it a night. I think things went really well. I know that you guys are, I know that this is really fun. I'm going to try to get Step Back Today going for next week. I was going to do it yesterday, but I was really jet lagged and really busy and tired with all the stuff that was going on, trying to, adapt to getting back to work. And on top of that, I'm hoping I can have Mia Mulder as my regular co-host for that show. And Mia Mulder is really sick right now, so hopefully we can get there. Answer my last question. Should we be worried about the BRIC countries don't have much respect for things like racial, sexual diversity? I answered that question. I said yes, a little bit, except, yeah, I don't know. What mother question is there to answer?
There's one about Japan being racially homogenous. There's one about Zimbabwe.
Where's those?
They're happening right now. Why is Japan very racially homogenous?
Why is Japan very racially homogenous? Because they have a, absolutely oppressive immigration system. They allow, almost no immigration. And they have a language that nowhere else in the world speaks. And they aren't very accommodating to other languages. So not only is it almost impossible to immigrate to Japan, but then you have to learn a brand new language that is extremely complicated. So that's the reason why Japan is very homogenous. What was the other one? What is up with Zimbabwe? I don't know. I haven't been following the news for the last week. Did something happen in Zimbabwe? Okay. I think those are a good lightning round to finish off on. You guys have been great. Hopefully we'll get Step Back Today going next Monday. I'm going to talk to Mia Mulder. But yeah, you guys are great. This stream is great. The lighting looks wonderful. And I hope to see you guys next time.